Welcome back to The Calm in the Storm. This is a series on how people deal with sudden change. And with us for episode 4, as always, is Kim Self, who is an entrepreneur and importer with Aromatica Fine Teas in Chilliwack, and also a graduate from the University of San Diego in marriage and family counseling. Welcome back to the show.
Good to see you again, Barris. Thank you.
Good to see you. Now, we've covered a lot of material in the first few episodes. First episode was called Staying Safe in the Storm. Mm-hmm. Number 2 was The Train of Change. And number 3, You Can Get There From Here. What are we doing today?
Well, today we're going to talk about, this wraps everything up, and it's the only 3 things that are real in change. So that's important.
Yeah, very important. So let's dive right in. What do we? How do we do that?
Okay, every one of us, when we encounter change, it brings out our story, and our story is personal to each one of us. It makes sense to us. It's powerful, and it's pretty much what drives our lives all the way through the change that we encounter, all the way through our recovery, all the way through our adaptation. It's our story that is driving us. Let's say you have person A who has had a thriving business. Suddenly the pandemic comes along. They see this thing begin to wither, and ultimately it dies, and now they feel like a complete failure. Somebody else may have experienced tremendous loss. They lose their loved one, and they feel like they can't go on. 2-3 years go by, and they just can't somehow shake it. They can't get back to life as they would like to live it. All these stories surround us, and they're what drive our responses, or what drive our experience, really, of change. But the important thing to remember is that there are 3 elements that drive everything. The first one I used to call facts, but facts are so elusive that I've even changed the label of that, because who knows what the facts are? You can look at things that happen and think you know the facts, but who really knows the facts about the pandemic? Who really knows the facts about most things that are happening in government? Who knows the facts about our own life? We think we do, but what we're really describing are the events that we're dealing with. And our brain is really not set up to deal with just naked facts. In order for us to make sense of things, in order for us to catalog things, in order for us to even retain things in our memory, we can't just let it stop at naked facts. We start adding all sorts of embellishments. Bruce Hood, several years ago, wrote a book called The Self-Illusion. And he talked about in that book that there were several experiments done where he showed a video of an accident that happened at an intersection. And he had some people watch the video, and then he asked them, did the white car jump the red light? And the fact is, there was no white car in the video. There was no white car on the scene, and everybody caught it. But when he brought them back in 2 weeks later, every one of those people said contributing to the accident was the white car that jumped the red light. There was no white car there.
Power suggestion.
Yeah, he also asked several people, he had some significant people in their lives tell them that at one point they had been left behind at the mall. They were at the mall for most of a day. And people had these vivid memories. They told him these vivid horror stories of how terrible it was to be abandoned, and how lost they were, and how painful the memory was. And the fact is, not one of them had ever been left at the mall. But they were told they were, and so they created a story around this event to sort of explain it to themselves and learn how to deal with it. One of the banes of being a police officer is when you come to an accident, there's this theory of multiple adherence that works in humans, and it is that if there are 8 people present at an accident, you're going to have 7 different stories of what happened, because we start reading into it. My mother was in an accident like this, and she got screwed by the insurance company, so by God, here's what happened. And everybody starts building a story, and that 8th person is just going to listen to the loudest voice and say, yeah, they were right, they were right. But there are a lot of reasons why the facts are so hard for us to hold on to. Theory of multiple adherence is one of them. There's another thing that our brain doesn't do very well, and it's called inattentional blind spots. So Barris, I'm going to ask you to play along with me for just a minute, if you're up to it.
I'm here to play.
All right. I would like you to look around this room. Just look around this whole room and study it very, very carefully. Be careful, there is going to be a test.
Okay.
And I'd like you to identify every green thing you see.
Well, the audience may not
Don't say
agree.
it. Don't say it. Just catalog it to
Okay.
yourself, and I'm going to ask you for a number. How many green things do you see?
I only see one green thing right now.
Okay, look carefully.
Okay.
Have you done, good catalog?
I got,
Sure you paid attention?
yeah.
So how many red things did you see?
Okay, can I keep looking or?
No, the simple fact is, one of the,
Zero.
that's the theory of inattentional blind spots. The fact is, what we look for, and this is important, what we look for determines what we miss. And so as we go through life, one of the things we have to be very careful of is what we set our reticular activating system for, because that's the third thing. And I know this is all kind of technical stuff, but it's really important. The reticular activating system is a part of your brain that responds to what you say is important. So when you tell yourself something is important, you're being hit by about 1 million bits of data every second. You can't handle all that. So your brain actually kicks into gear, and it will start filtering out things that don't match your value system. You may have bought a car at some point, and suddenly you start seeing that car all over town. You buy a coat, and suddenly you start seeing that coat all over town. What you tell your brain to pay attention to is what it's going to look at. And what you look at determines what you miss. So guess what? You set your brain up to see outrage. You set your brain up to see injustice. You set your brain up to see bad things, ugliness, evil everywhere. Guess what you're going to see, and guess what you're not going to see. Some people have told themselves they're no good at math, and they become experts at overlooking the hundreds of successful calculations they do during the day. How long will it take me to get to work? Am I late? Am I going to be late? I got to beat this train, man. I'm going to be late. How much gas do I have? How much money do I have? They're doing math all day long, but they've set their reticular activating system to something some teacher said at some point in their life, and they will ignore all the things that disagree with or that contradict what they've told themselves about themselves. That's what our brain does with facts. So the first reality, the first important thing is facts. The second thing is story. And story is what we create in order to help us understand what we think the facts are, what we think the events mean for everything. They're the way that we assign meaning to stuff. And one of the things that happens, that these poor facts that we deal with, these poor events that we encounter through our lives, as soon as we encounter them, they have to make it through our own personal land of the apes. And the land of the apes that sits inside each one of our brains is this land of assumptions, prejudices, and experiences. And prejudices aren't racial, they're just prejudgments. So we make assumptions all the time. We have all these prejudgments all the time. We have these experiences that start coloring the events in our lives. And out of that land of the apes, we start writing these stories. And these stories are what get us in trouble. A friend of mine said that one of the games we play most often is a game called Name, Names, and Nurture. And that is, we start giving something a name, and we will nurture that name regardless of what else life throws at us. If you have a favorite comedian and you think this comedian is funny, you can actually watch them bomb and not be funny at all, but they'll still be the funniest guy you know. If there's somebody you don't like, they can do something that's really successful. They can do something that's brilliant, and you'll still think they're stupid if that's the name that you've assigned to them. So it's really, really, really important. One of the most important questions you'll ever answer, and one of the most important decisions you're ever going to make, is the final word in this sentence, I am, and whatever you fill in the blank with is what you're going to nurture. You're just going to build on that, and you're going to build a story out of that. Whether it's true, whether it's false, it really doesn't matter. Your story is what drives everything. It's the power of your life. It's what you've done with the events. So you've got to be really, really careful during times of change, during times of social upheaval, during times of pandemic. What's your story you're telling yourself? How are you putting the color? What's the spin you're putting on these events that you're encountering all day long? Be very careful, because right now in North America, the biggest addiction is victimhood. And if we start terming ourselves victims, if we start considering ourselves victims and name it, and that becomes our story, that's what we'll become. There is a big difference in saying I'm a victim of something versus I'm a survivor of something. The events are the same. It's the story that changes. Years ago, Albert Ellis created an entire psychotherapy around the fact that most people think A equals C. The action equals the consequence. In reality, what he shows is that A plus B equals C. The action and your belief about it is what determine the consequences. That's the power of story. And then the last thing of importance, the only other real thing, is lessons. Because the lessons the events give us are the gifts it gives us when we get our victim story out of the way. Now think about that. The lessons that you can get from any event, tragic, horrible, good, sublime, whatever it is, the lessons are going to come when you get your victim story out of the way. And you start creating a story of power, a story of resourcefulness, a story of courage. And that's what every one of us have to be during this time of change. I mean, and the events are just there. They are what they are. You got to question the story you're writing. Because if you write a powerful story, you'll have a powerful life. You write a victim story, you're going to be nothing but a victim for the rest of your life. And the sad thing is there are whole bureaucracies that are invested in keeping you a victim. Don't fall for it. Don't do it, because the lessons are out there. They're available to us. It's like Tony Robbins said, life happens for us, not to us. So I want to wind up, and I really appreciate you staying with us through these 4 episodes, but I want to just finish everything with a story that actually happened. Unusual for me to tell a story that actually happened, and that's the nice thing about getting old. Some of the things you remember actually did occur. But there was a story about a professor at the University of North Texas State University. This is back in the 70s. And this guy was about 5'3", maybe weighed 160 pounds, just a tiny guy. But he was one of those guys that had a voice that was an octave lower than God. And he came walking in on the first day of class, freshman history class, and he had this big lawyer briefcase satchel that was about half as tall as he was. And he came down to the front of the class, and he lifted it up, and he dropped this thing on the desk, and it just slammed down. And then he spun, and he put his finger into the face of the first freshman he came to, and he said, "How far is it from you to the cave?" And of course, they didn't know what to say. They thought this guy's crazy. So he moved to the next person. "How far is it from you to the cave?" On to the third person. "How far is it from you to the cave?" And when he finally had his effect, he stood back by his desk and he said, "I'll tell you how far it is from the cave. You are from the cave. It's 6 inches. It's the distance between your ears." The things that happen in there, the stories you tell yourself in your brain are going to determine whether we as a people move forward into the sunlight or whether we slither back into the cave. Every one of us is always 6 inches from the cave. So what we've tried to do in these episodes is give you some tools, give you some maps to make sure that you have some resources to step out into the sun. It's coming. We just have to be ready for it.
Well, Kim, thank you so much. I think even more than the tools per se, I feel in watching, in interviewing it, but also in watching these episodes, has been that you create an understanding that there is a way to handle it. However we choose to handle it, just people in the midst of change and sudden change, they're not thinking about, oh, how do I handle that? They're just, it's happening to them. But you're giving them a framework, and you're letting them know that there even is a framework that exists for people to be thinking in those terms. So I love that. I love the lesson that you provided today. And it was actually the most entertaining. I thought it was quite an entertaining episode. Thank you so much for that, too.
Well, it's really a mindset. It's like my grandfather used to say, even if it kills me, I ain't going to lay down and die.
Well, it's great. And I hope everyone in our audience has enjoyed all 4 episodes of The Calm in the Storm. We may not have answered all your questions, and because of that, we've got Kim's email on the screen, so you can get in touch with him directly if you've got any questions that you'd like answered. But on behalf of chillTV, thank you so much, Kim, for doing this series. We really appreciate it, especially in this time of the pandemic. It's given just a different perspective. And thank you, most of all, the audience, for watching our series. We really appreciate that. Till next time.